Good evening. This will be the work session for October 10th, 2023 of the Pinehurst Village Council. We've completed our regular meeting, moved to the work session. Our first item of discussion is a presentation from the members of the Given Tufts Foundation Board. And I believe we have Mr. Stuart Mills, who is the chairman. And Gavin, what is your position now, Gavin?
I'm on the board.
Mattis?
Yeah.
A board member, okay. And for those who are listening to the meeting, as well as those here, just prior to opening the work session, the foundation board members were supplying to the council a presentation that they wish to make tonight. Stuart, is any of this on slides? I guess it's all in front of us here?
It is, yeah.
Okay, fine. And does the slides follow directly along with this? Okay, fine. We wait your word. Thank you very much. Go right ahead.
Hello, everybody. We're pleased to be here. Thank you for the invitation to speak with you tonight. Is that on?
Will you just move near you?
It's on. Just
Bring the
draw it a
microphone
little closer.
closer,
Yeah.
Is that any
And
better?
Stuart, I should have, for the general public who is here or listening, I should have framed the fact that you are here to follow up on the discussions which Village Council's been having with staff and our consultant regarding a new library structure and how to update the current building for the Tufts Archives. And we've had quite a number of discussions. As you know, you're part of we are stakeholders in this endeavor with the archives and library, have been for over a year and a half now. And we appreciate the fact you've come to give us some information that you think will be helpful in our evaluation of how to structure the library and some thoughts you have on that. So with that, I hope that's a better introduction than I just gave before. Thank you.
I think they both were good. Thanks.
Okay. Thank
Thanks,
you,
Mayor. Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the invitation. Not 100% certain what you want to hear about, so we put together some slides, and we'll try and see what you're most interested in talking about. We'll pause on the things that you look most interested in. A little disclaimer, neither Gavin nor I are librarians or archivists. The foundation no longer owns the library of the archives. The village owns the library of the archives. So there's a lot of detailed information that you have that we don't have. But what we do know a lot about is the history of the foundation and the library and the archives. We'll talk a little bit about that. The Given Tufts Foundation, a little bit of history. In 1964, the Pinehurst Resort donated the land on the village green, and Sarah Given Larson donated money to build the Given Memorial Library. And our parents, John and Irene Hines Given, I think it's appropriate to mention their names and to remember them now. In 1974, the Tufts Family Foundation gave the funds and another plot of land to build the Tufts Archives and to create an endowment for its support. The foundation now works in partnership with the Village of Pinehurst. We're very proud of our public-private partnership with you. You've been wonderful partners to work with to support these cherished institutions. The foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that's independent of the village government. The foundation, as you know, operates the Given Tufts Bookshop for the benefit of the library and the archives. And our understanding is that the profits from the bookshop will be turned over to the village. And I'm pleased to say that this afternoon we handed in the first $25,000 check of profits from the archives, which is a partial down payment on this year's profits. The foundation also maintains an endowment for the library and the archives. The current balance is about $2.6 million. And the first $105,000 annual payment from the endowment to the village for support of the library and the archives was made in December 2022, and there'll be another similar check in December 2023. The foundation conducts an annual appeal and fundraisers to benefit the library and the archives. In the last year, proceeds from these activities paid for things like the subscription to the museum software that the archives use, which is called Past Perfect, and for new furniture in the children's room of the library. And we have some other projects that we're working on so that private funds can help support our library and our archives. Since we donated the library and the archives to the Village of Pinehurst, we've had organizationally a lot of changes. We've changed our name. We used to be called the Given Memorial Library, Inc., and now we're called the Given Tufts Foundation, Inc., but we're the same entity and the same board of directors. We've done some strategic planning and adopted a new strategic plan. We've added some new board members. We're implementing a reorganization of our board to reflect the fact that it's now more of a working board, since most of our staff is now staff of the village and not staff of the foundation. We've adopted a new business and successful business plan for the bookshop. We've hired a fund administrator and an experienced bookshop manager. We've made the bookshop more profitable than it ever has been. We're regularly increasing the number of books sold from the bookshop to well above the pre-pandemic records. We believe that the bookshop has more foot traffic, or is one of the retailers during the day that has the most foot traffic of any retailer in the village, at least in the center of the village. And we are proud of our public-private partnership with the village to promote the archives and the library. How did we get here? Just a little bit of history, more specifically to the project we're talking about today. In 2018, the Village Council and the Foundation formed a task force to study the future of the library. We met, I think, over 20 times that year. In 2019 and 2020, the village hired a consultant called Library IQ, who engaged a large number and a variety of Pinehurst residents in a wide-ranging community input exercise, including a survey. There were interviews, there were open public meetings, there were community conversations. People were chosen to participate in the community conversations based on applications so that we could get a representative group, or the village could have a representative group involved in the discussion. There were people from every major neighborhood. There was a big range of ages represented. There was diversity from a gender, occupation, children, no children, library user, non-library user. All those people were involved in the discussions. In 2020, a second survey was commissioned, the results of which were precise within the 4.8% plus or minus range at a 95% confidence level. The survey showed substantial support for expansion of library services. I'm focusing on using the word services in particular. It was the services people wanted more of. This second statistically valid survey was conducted in part to avoid undue influence by those who favored expansion of the library and by those who didn't favor expansion of the library. It was trying to get a representative sample of what the people of Pinehurst, the residents of Pinehurst wanted. In September 21, on the back of the survey and the interest that was demonstrated in the village taking over the library and expanding it, the village came to the foundation and it asked us to donate the library, which we had always thought would probably happen, and the archives, which is a surprise to us because until that time the village hadn't shown a tremendous interest in the archives, and the building itself. And in return, the idea was to have the village undertake to expand and improve both of those facilities. After it came to us as a little bit of a surprise, but after thinking about it, we thought it made perfect sense, and that is the arrangement that we came to. In April 2022, the village took ownership of the Given Memorial Library and the Tufts Archives, which was a multi-million-dollar gift from the foundation, but it wasn't a completely selfless gift because the village also started becoming responsible for the operation of the library and also made an undertaking to expand and improve the library and the archives. In 2022 and 2023, our observation is that the village has made steady progress in planning for the expansion and improvement of the library and the archives, with the goal of construction commencing after the 2024 U.S. Open. We'd like to acknowledge the good faith and the diligence demonstrated by the village staff, by the mayor, by the village council in pursuing this and living up to the spirit of our agreement with you. Next slide. We have some information here that we've extracted from the Library IQ study, which I think is the definitive survey on this topic. They talked a little bit about the recommended size of the library. I won't read all of it, but they said a 20,000 square foot facility would accommodate the desired collection size and allow for future growth if needed. A 17,000 square foot facility would generally accommodate the desired collection size. A 14,000 square foot facility would require reductions to the recommended collection size and or elimination of some program spaces, and is the smallest recommended facility. That was what the consultants recommended. The size of the library has been reduced from those, recommendations from the consultants for reasons that we understand, due largely to the expense, because you have other things you need to accomplish at the same time, and we're sensitive to that. The building you are considering is by no means lavish, but it will be a big improvement over what we've had in the past and deeply appreciated. And it's likely to be a significant step forward, and we appreciate your diligently pursuing it. Gavin, I was going to talk a little bit more about some of the other survey results.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, I just want to go quickly through a few other library IQ points that were in the assessment. And we found strong support for the village taking over the library and funding it and leading day-to-day operations. It was 67% of respondents were in favor of that back in 2020, 2021 when the results were published. And we even found 57% of village residents were willing to pay some sort of tax increase. 31% were open to a 1-cent tax increase, 13% were open to a 2-cent tax increase, 10% for a 3-cent tax increase, and 3% were even open to a 5-cent tax increase. Doug, I think you probably go to the next slide. And then, you know, in the last council meeting, everyone was very interested in terms of figuring out what exactly Pinehurst residents were wanting the most out of the new library. And the assessment found that the children's book collection was the most popular with it's what, 85% were in support of that, 84%. Pat, I know you were interested in seeing a larger digital media collection, 82% more children's programs, 81% looking for a larger young adult items and magazine collection, and 80% looking for a larger adult book collection. So a variety of services, but I think you'll probably notice a trend throughout the presentation that there's a large appetite for more services for children and young adults that we want to make sure does occur with the construction of a new library. Again, yeah, to that point, in terms of households with children were a very large segment in terms of library usage. About 60% of households with children under the age of 18 use the library at least once a year, and half of those were using it once or twice a month. You know, in the last meeting, we discussed the resident survey about, I think it was 38%, 40%, so they use it on an annual basis. So kind of compare that to a household with a child, they're far heavier users of the library. Children's programs were one of the biggest draws for households with children, and a number of those who come to the Saturday monthly sessions for arts and crafts usually end up checking out a book. We found about 80.6% check out books when they're in the library. And that the need for a larger space to accommodate this type of programming was a major driver that we discovered in the assessment. There was a large appetite for that. Those who brought children to the Given Memorial Library tended to be dissatisfied with the current space just because it's the same space as the young adult collection, the children's collection, and it's within 15 feet of the adult collection. So wanting to expand that a bit was a priority for many of the respondents in the assessment. As all of you know, the population of Pinehurst is booming, and which comes with some problems, but it's a great problem to have. And we wanted to flag this just because we need to be very aware of, you know, we don't want to build a library that we're going to outgrow immediately in 2-3 years. Currently, the population sits a little over 18,000. It will likely hit 20,000 by 2030, and then 23,000 by 2040, and according to the last census. We want to take a quick look at just, you know, what's driving a lot of that. And one of the biggest increases was households with children. So about a 13% increase in the number of households with children. That's a little over 1,400 of those households in the Pinehurst area have kids. And then, according to the last census, we're about 3,000 kids under the age of 15. Yeah, and Doug, you can probably go to the next slide. With the program that Oakley Collier put together and shared with you guys last time, they were looking at about 36,000 books, so that would be a substantial increase in terms of number of books per resident. Right now, it's about 17,000, so that's a 0.9% in terms of books per resident. That would bring it up to about 2 books per resident. As the population grows, fall back behind the North Carolina average, is around 1.9 books per resident. As you can see, we'd still fall quite short behind the Southern Pines Public Library. And then we just also wanted to kind of show that there is a gap in terms of public school libraries. This was a point you guys brought up in the last meeting. Just wanted to kind of share a few more details about it. Even though the Pinehurst Elementary School's fantastic new library, it still falls a little bit short of the state average in terms of number of books per student at 16.47. And And as you move up to middle school or high school, the gap becomes even more pronounced, about 13 books per student at West Pine Middle and only 3.5 books at Pinecrest High. So, any library that is constructed, we want to make sure that it kind of closes that gap and helps young adults as they move up through the Pinehurst school system, Moore County school system. Again, in the last council meeting, you guys were looking for a comparison to other neighboring libraries, and it turned out, Southern Pines obviously has many, in terms of population, and actually the percentage of kids under the age of 18 as a percentage of the population was remarkably close to Pinehurst, even closer than we originally thought. So it's pretty good apples to apples comparison. In 1995, they built their library about 14,750 square feet. All the proposals we're looking at are coming in quite below that, at least initially, unless you look to expand in future years. We were able to connect with Jessica Roth, the assistant city manager in Southern Pines, and one of the big points she highlighted for us was circulation attendance has already surpassed pre-pandemic levels. 56% of materials checked out, or it's a 56% more materials, an increase since their best year, which was 2019, before the pandemic. Attendance has returned to pre-pandemic levels, and they have as many as 1,600 people who attend 64 different programs during a peak month. It happened to be the summer months of 2022 is what she pointed out to us. And we also just wanted to make the point is I think there's a lot of conversation out there about, or a lot of comparisons to when the community center was built, and a lot of people said, oh, this is not needed, and very few people would use this. I think a lot of the numbers since then have proven that's not the case. If you see the community center was constructed or opened in February of 2020, even with the pandemic, you only see a slight dip here, and then the last 2-3 years, the number of people participating in activities, athletic or recreational, has more than doubled. And this isn't we don't want to compare this to like a Field of Dreams situation. If you build it, they will come. But I think people need to be aware that just how vital a lot of these buildings are, the services provided by them turn out to be to all the households with kids in Pinehurst. Doug, I think you probably go to the next slide. And we'd expect to see probably a similar increase in terms of activity at an expanded library. Right now, circulation's at 2.9 books per resident. That's largely a function of how many books are in the library. I'm sure many of you have gone in and come out empty-handed just because the library cannot carry that many books, given its current size of around 3,800 square feet as it is right now. It's dedicated to the library itself.
Try to tie this in a little bit to some of the things that you've said were important in the comprehensive plan. One of the ideas was the golf by day, arts by night. We'd like to think that the library and the archives are Pinehurst's principal cultural resources that exist. There was a 2019 Gallup survey, a little bit old, but I doubt it's changed, that shows that Americans still visit the library. It's their number one most common cultural activity for Americans, exceeding by far their participation in other leisure activities, including sporting events, movies, or even casinos. I think the village is interested in being a digital village, and I think that this could be a key way to promote that. Our library can become a hub of digital literacy and connections, but sufficient space is required to teach and to connect. Building a quality library, I think, is perhaps the best gift that this generation of Pinehurst residents can make to the next generation of Pinehurst residents. Most of us grew up, most of us grew up going to libraries that were not paid by ourselves, were not paid for by our parents, but were paid for by generations before that with their taxpayer dollars and their private donations. And in that spirit, I think we should invest in this library and the archives as well. With respect to the capital campaign, in the 2020 ETC survey, 66% of Pinehurst residents expressed an interest in donating to a capital campaign for purposes of improving the library. At this point, the archives wasn't on the table. We weren't even talking about the archives. This was just about the library. In our 2021 agreement, the foundation agreed that we would lead a capital campaign if the village wanted us to support expansion and improvement of the library and the archives. With input from the village, the mayor, other council members, and particularly the village staff, the foundation has, at our own expense, engaged a firm called Capital Development Services from Winston-Salem to conduct a 3-month feasibility study to determine how much could be raised in a capital campaign like that, which we'd like to proceed with soon. and they're ready to proceed very soon with that. Now that we have some schemata and renderings and things like that we can use, we feel like we could go ahead in working on that capital campaign. First, by doing a feasibility study to see how much we think we can raise, and then immediately going into the campaign if it's a big enough number that's worth pursuing. I guess, you know, we're not here to criticize you. I think that you guys have acted in tremendous great faith, good faith, and consistent with the spirit of our agreement that we made when we donated the library and the archives to the village. What we would recommend, it's just something I don't think would be controversial, is that at a minimum, you should select a site where if you decide in the future to expand it, you have enough space on that site to expand it, which I think means that option 2 doesn't look particularly attractive from our perspective, but the other 2 options, I think, do have room for expansion in the future. I think you should build as big a library as you feel that you can afford to do right now, considering the other things that you're working on. But this is a project that has been thought about for more than 30 years, for more than 3 decades here, and a tremendous amount of work has been done between 2018 and now. We have no reason to believe that the results of another study, just like the one that we did before, would be different. You know, the survey results are interesting. You know, even the survey that that we're referring to, the ETC survey from 2020, the residents say, we're happy with the library and the archives. But then when you ask them specifically, are there other services that you'd like to be provided, you get like 85% of people saying, we would like this service to be enhanced. We would like that service to be enhanced. And Gavin talked about some of those things. The question is, how do you jive that? We're happy with it, but we want more services. I think when you look at the wonderful experience that Southern Pines is having with its library and how wonderful it is for its community, there's no reason to think that we would not have that experience here in Pinehurst. Our children need to read just as much as the Southern Pines children need to read. Our children go to the same public schools that the Southern Pines children go to. I think we should look at that as something that is really worth having, an excellent library just like they have in Southern Pines. As far as timing goes, I wish that you would proceed as quickly as possible, the way that you have been doing, and stick with the schedule that we had talked about of proceeding as soon after the U.S. Open as is possible. I do think there's an opportunity in this planning stage to take 3 months and work on the feasibility study to see just how big a budget we have for spending on this project. And I would hope that if we could raise a significant amount of money, that would influence the size of the library going forward. So those are our recommendations. Maybe we should pause and let you ask questions. Is that what you wanted from us? Is that the sort of discussion you were looking for?
Well, maybe yes, maybe no.
We'll see.
At the last meeting on September 26th, I was not actually here for that meeting. During that presentation, I did arrive later. I've looked at the video of that. And at that meeting, as I'm sure you're aware, after considerable discussion with Oakley Collier, the council came to a consensus that we endorsed what was called option number 3 in the presentation from Oakley Collier, which is the site just a little further down Magnolia Road, roughly across from the entrance to Trinity Christian Fellowship. After looking at the 3 alternatives, which were across the road here and another location at near the fire station, and then option number 3, which the consensus of my colleagues was the best consensus for us to follow, and some additional work would be done. I wasn't here at that meeting, as I said. However, I've discussed this with village staff. I've looked at the video, and my recommendation would have been consistent with theirs at that time for option number 3. Subsequent to that meeting, there was a meeting with yourselves, the village manager, and some others. And my understanding was you had some thoughts about what you might want to do to see how a capital campaign might come together, and if that would influence the decision of the council as to where the building would be, and also the size. So that was the primary reason, I think, that we asked you here tonight, and there was requests, I think, from all of the council members that, in fact, we need to discuss this with the foundation board, and that was the reason, again, to invite you here tonight. I want to make sure that my council colleagues will now have the option to discuss with you whatever questions they might have from this report. But there was some thought in our minds, if they want to discuss it tonight, about what was the future as to timing. Why would we want to delay moving ahead, which we've been encouraged to do by our residents and others, including yourselves. The fact that if we delay, costs may increase for whatever decision we are going to make, and been some consensus on that already, as I mentioned. So there's some questions in our mind, I think, as to why we would need or want at this point, having gone through several years, as you've identified, and kind of revisit again site and size when we've looked at all these issues over time and tried to come to the best recommendations that we could on behalf of the residents of Pinehurst over the last couple of councils. So at this point, comment as you wish, but I want to make sure that my council colleagues, because they were the ones actively here, and I support what they decided, we came maybe to hear a few other things from you.
I don't think we want you to delay. And in that conversation, just to back up, we have an agreement with you, and in the
Yes.
agreement, it says that the
Yes.
foundation will lead a capital campaign.
Yes,
if the village wants
absolutely.
to. And
And
we
you've
are
done-
tendering that and saying, we are willing to lead a capital campaign, and we've hired what we think is the best firm in North Carolina to do that, and they think there's potential to raise a significant amount of money. When we talked with Oakley Collier about it, I didn't get the sense that that was going to introduce, and Jeff, you were there, whether that was going to introduce a significant amount of delay, but you have to have a use of proceeds. What is the money being raised for? And one of the things in that group, as we met that day, we thought was maybe the additional money would make the option of building a larger library, put that on the table. It could be, for instance, maybe it would allow you to add the 2,000 additional square feet to option 3 that was, something for later, or maybe it would even raise enough money that option 1 became more attractive again. I didn't think that Oakley or Collier thought that doing a 3-month sort of feasibility study between like December and March was going to delay going forward. Is that accurate?
Right. Okay. Let me see, let me open it up now to questions from the council and about their perspective on this. I'm sure there'll be many. And let's see if we can talk this around and move it along. Questions from council?
A bunch.
Lydia?
It's funny because 2020,
Lydia, could you bring that microphone just a
Yeah.
little closer? Thanks. So-
2020, my question was, what does this community want? And what do they want to pay for? It's now 2023, and it's what does this community want? And what do they want to pay for it? I went through, many of you guys know that I went through and I put all of my documents in chronological order. And I've got a list here if anybody wants it, if this will help council know. But as I went through this, and I saw step by step how thorough we were. But I can also say I don't recall step by step what we did. But as I went through this, I remember I want to go through it again to understand what the community wants. But also with the ETC survey, that was before you guys did your transfer agreement. So at the time when we did the ETC survey and we asked people what they're willing to pay, we didn't know that we were going to have an infusion from the library foundation. So I don't know if that makes a difference, but to me, this is clearly will be a decision of the next council. And I hope the next council can get fully up to speed on what's been done up to this point. And, this goes through 2021 when we did the transfer agreement. And then nothing happened in 2022 till we hired Oakley Collier. But, there are people, I've got some questions here to read. There's some people in this community who are not convinced that this is what the community wants. And when we see the dollar amount now, we've really got to establish, once again, what this community wants. It may be just going through this again and digesting it again. But when we're spending this much money, we really need to know what the community wants and how much they're willing to spend for it. But just a few questions. I met with some residents the other day who don't think that we're going in the right direction. So I agreed to ask some of their questions tonight. Not all of them, but what would you consider the mission of the foundation right now? How would you describe your mission?
Well, our only purpose is to support the library and the archives.
Okay.
And we focus on fundraising and monitoring this relationship that we have, much like the Village Heritage Foundation monitors its relationship with the village with respect to the Arboretum and the Fair Barn. We monitor our relationship with the village in respect to the library and the archives. But it's not, we're not the library, we're not the archives, we're supporters of the library and the archives.
Correct. Okay. And that was kind of the answer I was expecting, but wanted to hear it. In the agreement, and I have to go back and look at it, you guys are obligated to give us the money from the endowment. What is your contribution to the village every year to fund the library and the archives? Do you recall? It's in the agreement, right?
There's a formula. We're required to give the village at least 4% of the 3-year trailing average balance of the endowment, which
Okay.
ended up being $105,000 in December. And I imagine it'll be a little bit more this year because the
Okay.
market's gone up some.
And I remember going through that formula, the term sheet, and going through that in the formula. What is going on with the roast office? I know the village had thought about taking over before that building was sold. And what is the arrangements now with the bookstore and the owner of that building and the lease for that space for the used bookstore?
We have a lease over the bookshop, which the original term expires in the summer of 2024.
Okay.
But we have 2 options to extend by 5 years, so for a total of 10 years.
Okay.
And we are confident enough that the bookshop will continue to be profitable, that although we haven't voted on it on the board, I'd be shocked if we didn't extend the
Okay.
lease and stay in that building for another 10 and a half years.
Okay. Let me see. In the past few years, in the foundation of the library was given bookshop used for library events. I think you have been using them. Wait. The given bookshop used for any library events. I know there have been events going on. I'm not sure the relevance of that question.
Some events occur, but yeah, not necessarily library-associated ones. The owner does provide events in the evening on who we lease from Mr. Thompson. He does provide some events there in the evening.
Okay. And fundraising, I know you guys have had to hire somebody to do fundraising because that's not your expertise, correct?
We have a lot of people who are very involved in the philanthropic community who are associated with the foundation. But if you want to make sure all the thank you notes get written and that we stay on schedule, you need sort of an administrator, and we have an excellent administrator.
To do your fundraising?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I work for a venture capital firm who raises,
Yeah, I
$250
thought I
million
saw the
funds.
name of somebody here who was going to do your fundraising, or somebody you
They are in the presentation, yeah, Capital
Okay.
Development of Winston-Salem.
That's just for the capital campaign,
Correct, yeah.
not for the other fundraising.
Okay. And also, it seemed like when we knew the USGA was coming and they're coming with museum pieces and you guys have your archives pieces, is there any coordination with USGA about sharing what's in the archives stay in the archives and what the USGA has will stay in the USGA building, or will there be any coordination or?
Lydia, that's a question for us to answer. We own the archives.
Yeah, archives, okay.
So all the questions related to what's in the archives are the decision now of the Village of Pinehurst.
And I guess what I'm
And-
thinking
and-
about is before we took over the archives, and the USGA was coming, it seemed like there was some talk about sharing, but you're right, once we took over the archives.
There's been no discussion with the USGA or other parties about the archives, other than, questions like that might come up, but there's been no discussion at this point. And I think until the USGA is well settled here in Pinehurst, after another year or two, there will be discussions by this village council. But that's our responsibility now, that Stuart and the foundation are doing just what they were asked to do. They're managing the endowment, they're managing the bookstore. Their responsibility is the lease to the old post office building. And they're in fundraising mode and have brought to our attention the CapDev people and a couple of meetings that we've had about the way forward. And that's brought us here to tonight. Yeah, yeah. Yes, yeah,
There have been some preliminary discussions with Dornoch about
correct.
sharing some exhibit material.
Yeah, and I just, again, this just takes me back to the, when USJ was announced they're coming, and we knew there was it was uncertain about what they were bringing and what they weren't bringing, and then we knew things were in the archives, and was there any possibility we're going to share? But John, you're exactly right now that we've got the archives, and USJ has told us they're bringing.
Yeah, there's no, in my mind, there is no connection at this time between whatever the USJ is doing and whatever the Village of Pinehurst are doing with respect to museums, archives, whatever. There could be in the future, maybe be work, but there's not. There is a connection, which we've just established with Dornoch, and the possibility of exchanging items with their club on the one hand and their local archives on the other. But that's, yet to happen as well. But nothing related to anything that the foundation is responsible for.
I mean, I could see an occasion might occur where maybe there's an artifact or something that you want for the archives, but you don't feel you can spend municipal money on it, and so you would talk to the foundation and say, how could we pay for something like this? And that's what having a foundation helps. That helps municipal libraries. You see foundations associated with municipal libraries all over the country. We just happen to be starting with a new municipal library that already has a $3 million endowment and probably the best donor list in town. So I think we're starting in a good spot.
Right, right. Now,
I appreciate this. It will now go in with this, but I can't tell you how much it helped me to, as I was putting this together in chronological order. I told Doug I'm putting bricks together, just one brick upon another. And we really did put a lot of bricks in place in 2020 when we had all of our work sessions and everything we did in 2020 with all of the information we were receiving from everything we did for the needs assessment study. So.
I'm just worried if you leave it to the next council, how are you going to start construction shortly after the?
Well, next council, the election's in a month.
well,
Oh, you're the expert on that, not me. I just don't see how,
now,
Well, if you guys think we're in some position, but I want to get way more comfortable with what does the community want and how we're going to pay for it. And what we're going to pay for it has to do with what you guys can raise. So to me, maybe I'm looking at this in a strange way, but
no, I didn't mean that.
yeah, but your contribution to this will go a long way toward what ultimately will be done, in my view.
now, we've moved along, the foundation in its prior form and current form, and the last several councils to, as you pointed out in your report, to where we are today and where we were on September the 26th, 2 weeks ago. And at the core, I think what you're suggesting to us is you want some time to consult with your consultants and to have them do some work to determine what financial support is out there, and then get back to us with respect to how that might affect our final decision on where the where the library would be located, correct? That's basically what you're asking, that you want us to give you some time to work on a few items, although as the village manager pointed out, we are proceeding with Oakley Collier to figure out some costs and some issues that would relate to the building, whatever its structure, whatever its size and location would be.
I think the feasibility study can be conducted quickly enough that it's not going to significantly cause any significant delay.
Mm-hmm. Well, I come back to the point that 2 weeks ago, this body made some decisions on what we think is in the best long-term interest of the Village of Pinehurst to do with respect to the location of the library and the size and things we're working out. So I don't know if, taking more time to execute on your behalf information is going to be appealing, but that's the core of, I think, what you want us to consider.
John, I'd look at it, I know you're a financial person, I'd look at it as an option. What we're saying is we think we can do a capital campaign, we think we can do it quickly. We think that might give you some more options over what you want to do, but it's an option. You don't have to exercise it. We told you we would do a capital campaign, and we're tendering that, and you got to decide. And now is the time to do it, right? that it was no point doing a capital campaign before you even knew what the library is going to look like or anything like that. But now you have some very specific plans that we could take and talk to donors about, whether they would support it or not.
Maybe I can
Sure, there are other
add a
questions.
little
Jeff?
clarity. I think what's being asked here is that you start with what was agreed upon at the last meeting, option 3, and allow their capital developers to do this feasibility study based on a templated promise, if you will, of expansion either on the option 3 site or building on option 1, and coming back to you and providing you those results before you settle on the actual location. Because they can't do the feasibility study without being able to tie it to some sort of a promise. They have to be able to dangle something out there and say, this is what, if we offer this, how much of a draw will that be for capital funds? Is that a fair way to summarize that?
Other questions from council? I have a few more thoughts, but Tom, did you have a question?
How much money are we talking about here?
That's what we're going to find out in the feasibility study.
What do you think?
I think it's more than $500,000, and I think it's less than $10 million, but I don't really know. And that, because you got to respect the donors and see what they're interested in supporting.
How much more do we need?
And to Jeff's
A
point, I mean,
different,
if we presented option 1 to donors, we'd be far more likely to raise more than if we presented option 3 to donors, the single-story plan, with a different facade on option 2, and provide a few other, we think the likelihood of, just raising a higher sum would be higher if we presented them with something that would be of more impressive stature, essentially.
Yeah.
So it would vary depending on what was presented to potential donors.
I probably could do the math. I've got the old slides here, but I seem to recall that the difference in price between what was presented for option 1 and option 3 was about $3.5 million. Does that sound right, Doug?
yeah, that's what I remember. Mhm. Tom, any other thoughts from you? Questions?
Not right now.
Jeff Morgan? Nothing? Pat?
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, congratulations on the success of the bookstore, new management, and you're rolling in the dough, so we say. So thank you for that. And thank you for putting together a thoughtful presentation. The mayor already referred to the general consensus that we made a few weeks ago to pick a site which actually meets your first bullet. It allows for future expansion.
Is that clear, do you think?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's 2.1 acres. The Oakley Collier said it would make room for expansion, would be built in. I wouldn't have been supporting it if it wasn't room for expansion. I have my own criteria that I've developed, and in full disclosure, I'm a contributor to the library. I actually am in the minority. I visit it on an annual basis, okay? And in my last campaign for council, when I closed out my account, I closed it out by writing the check of surplus funds left to the library. So I come here with clean hands, but I come here with obviously the fiduciary role I have as an elected official of the Village of Pinehurst. I made a point, because I was not on the council, like one of my colleagues, or two of my colleagues, when the IQ study was done, the assessment that was done pre-COVID. So I went back and read that whole darn thing. I am also not a librarian, but I do read. Number one, we are a digital community. That was very clear in that. We have 93.8% of our residents have one or more type of a computing device. 90% of households have a desktop or a laptop. 91% of households have an internet subscription. and 90% have a broadband connection. So this library, which should be a library of the future, doesn't have to fill in a lot of gaps out there because we have this underserved community without access to technology. The top 3 reasons that respondents said that they didn't use the library was they have internet or computer connection at home, or they prefer to get books elsewhere. The people who go to the library, according to the data, are very happy. You've all said that. I am a proponent, to the dismay of some people, to see us go forward with the library and in archives. I was personally disappointed we couldn't pull it off at the Village Green, but here we are. But I believe we need to temper our expectations because of budget and the idea of expansion. Expansion is built on the possibility of the future. That's, to me, what expansion is. When we built the community center, we left room for expansion. We haven't exercised it yet. We may someday. As a matter of fact, as I sort of surveyed my email traffic and communication with people, there are 4 buckets of individuals in this community. There's the bucket that doesn't want to build a library. Or someone said to me, why do we need a second library? I'm not in that bucket. There's the bucket that thinks, you know, the sky's the limit. We need a library that's going to marvel Moore County and all of North Carolina. Then there's another small bucket. Why don't we put it at the community center? We left that space back there. That's not feasible. I don't think so either. But the bucket I'm in, which I think many people are in, is let's build a sensible, practical, first-class library with the ability to expand it into the future once we know we have a demand to expand it. That's what sort of really is, to me, is what future expansion is about. Not, I like the movie Build It and They Will Come. I don't know if we're going to build it and they will come. Everybody's got an internet connection. They might come. They might not. As far as, we'll go back to usage and comment on taxes, you accurately portrayed the amount of money people are willing to pay in taxes. 43% said 0. 31% said a penny. So that, you know, my basic University of South Carolina math, that's 74% of they're not willing to pay more than a penny. So there's not an appetite for spending on it. We as a village, for the last couple of years, have continually put out a number about what we were going to spend on this. I went back and looked at some of our previous strategic operating plans and our budgets. And though last December it moved from about 3.2 to 4.6, I remember I was surprised to hear that in the retreat. But then at that moment I said, well, look, this has got to be the top of the heap here. We went from 3.2 to 4.6. Okay, we'll swallow that. Now, it seems to be it's 7, 8, 9. It's getting a hefty number to it. And I think some of our residents are confused, which is what's prompted a lot of reaction about why we're building it, because the numbers they're seeing are getting a little larger. I'd like to address a couple of things about the makeup of our population, the age, and where we're headed. Both Aberdeen and Southern Pines in the last 10 years had an annual growth rate higher than Pinehurst. We're at 1.9%. One of the amazing pieces of data I stumbled into was that the median age of the residents of Pinehurst has only moved from 60.6 months to 60.3 months in the last 10 years. So we do have more kids, but we sure got a lot of people that are older than many of us sitting around this table. So we've got to be careful extrapolating too much about what our population will look like in 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. One it is just guess. But two, we only have so much space to grow. There's only so many lots to build on. Go around this town, go to communities. There's only so much. So where's public opinion? Lydia referenced earlier. We have some data. We have data about usage for the last 3 years, the ETC survey. 60% of our residents are not using that library as it is. 40% are. And a very happy and content 40%. There was a results from ETC survey that were given to us at our last retreat, where they listed our 12 major priorities, capital priorities for the Village of Pinehurst. The library was one of 12. And the library finished up in the bottom half as build a new library. I'm a skeptic on ETC survey results, as I said earlier, constantly been a skeptic, but it's the data we have. So sort of where am I in this? I want to see a new library built. I want to see an archives that can be built too, that we can be proud of, both buildings. I want to see there be room for expansion. But I do believe we need to, as I mentioned whatever it was 2 weeks ago, we need to sharpen our pencil so that we are, the community comes along and says, okay, that sounds reasonable. I think the best case for us is we want this library to be the object of the affection of our residents. We don't want it to be the object of their resentment. And budget discussions around this type of issue can tend to gel that up. So I liked where we came out last 2 weeks ago. I thought it was reasonable. And it was unanimous, which is, we often are always unanimous on things, but this was a major issue. And if you probably viewed the tape, I think everybody who came to that meeting came there thinking they were going to support something else as a site. And when it was over, in the discussion with the architects and with the staff, they all came around to another site. Let me go to the CAP fundraising effort for a while. I participated in two meetings, and I actually found my notes over the weekend. Stuart, you were there. And we met in July and about CAP development, met with the gentleman who's
CapDev, I think.
CapDev. Yeah, CapDev, as you call him. That's how I wrote it down. And they talked about, they were doing a study. They were going to begin to do a study, and they were going to produce a work product for you all by December of 2023. And that you were planning to have a soft launch, I'm quoting that, it's in quotes, from January to July of 2024. And in July of 24, you were going to have a public launch for fundraising. It sounds perfectly reasonable. And so I was, until this came up, I was figuring you guys are going to have some document by December. Maybe it came out quicker, I don't know. But I think that I would be interested in seeing what they say, because there isn't, as I went back and looked at the annual reports of the Givens Tufts Library, and I've heard the number 3.5, 4 million, whatever you think you can raise. There's not been that type of fundraising done before by Givens Tufts Archives Foundation on an annual basis. So that's a big bite out of an elephant.
We're not promising you a particular
I
number.
know you're
We're saying
not.
We got to study and figure out what we can raise.
I know you're not, and you've never suggested that. But you have aspirations, which is normal, but aspirations, sometimes we need to look at them in the light of history and how far we can go from where we are. The delay thing, it probably will cost some more money, but I am anxious to build the library, okay? And I think every time we delay something, we create problems every time. Because we don't know when the next pandemic is, we don't know when the next recession is, we don't know what's next. I think from the standpoint of size, because I believe what we did a couple of weeks ago was we really settled on a style and a location, a consensus. Size and price were left. The price tag obviously is driven by the size, as far as I can tell. And what I'm not sure as I went through the IQ study is the premise of exactly how many books are needed in the library. Do we want more books than we have now? I say yes. Okay. All right. But do we need as many as being tossed around? I don't know, because when we asked Oakley Collier about what was going to happen and how they got to these numbers, they cited two things: linear shelf space and population of our community. Population is what it is, but I don't think you build a library around the population when 60% of the people aren't using it. But linear shelf life, space, I'm not sure we need to bite off right away, whatever it is, 36,000 volumes. Maybe we bite off less than that, so we keep the costs down of our initial library. And then we see if this is going gangbusters, expand. Finally, I'll just, on the site, I, like my colleagues, we walked that site. We walked all three sites. I think we did, yes, we walked all three sites. The flattest one was the one that we can't take, the fire department, because there's just too many, EMS issues next to the fire department issues. But the option one, which looked like a very challenged bit of topography. I'm not an architect, I'm not a geologist, I'm just telling you, to quote one of my colleagues here, water flows downhill. And it did not look promising, but I dismissed it. The other thing I will say is when I viewed the two drawings side by side, the option one drawing looked like a parking garage with a library attached to it. The option three drawing looked like a library with the parking spaces. Okay? So I'm still at where I was 2 weeks ago as far as what's probably the best site. And it allows for future expansion. It's 2.1 acres versus 0.63 acres now. It's going to provide at least 30 parking spaces, designated parking spaces, of which we've had none for 60 years. It's very accessible to the Cannon Park and the community center. So are the other two sites. It's all a matter of yards. It's a couple of first downs from between one site and the other. But so that's where I'm at, and I listened carefully. I'd want to help you raise more money, okay? But I think we just have to be focused on what we're going to do, what you're going to do with that money that you raise, because there's a lot of things for the future. Not brick and mortar things necessarily, but programmatic things that you all could do. So that's where I'm at. I just wanted to be clear that I didn't want to mislead anybody. But
Thank you,
again,
Pat.
I really thank you. The thoughtfulness that you've put into this idea is apparent. I just have a, it just doesn't ring with me. I think we've got a great future with a new Given Memorial Library. I think we just need to settle on it, get the architects to draw something that looks like Pinehurst, and get to work on it. Thank you. No further comment.
Stuart, I've been thinking about the process and where we are, and I've got an idea that may be a little different than what you have in your mind, but I'm not sure. Before I discuss that, though, I want to make one thing clear, and I think some of my council colleagues share this and some don't, but it's something I've mentioned over time in looking at these three options. I've never been convinced that option number one, at the location directly across from Village Hall, works. Now, Pat commented on that a little bit just now. Others of the council have mentioned that in the past, but I've never been able to envision the library there in a way that I thought would be attractive and approachable, usable by people driving in and whatnot. And so, and I'm concerned with some topographical issues there, the water flowing downhill, all that, although Doug and other parts of our staff have seemed to think that's a manageable option. So I'm just saying that from the point of view that my concern here about building something like option one, at least on that place, is an issue for me, and it has been for some time, just the physical layout of how that building would work, which is troubling to me.
We didn't come here advocating.
No,
an
I
option.
know, and that's
Yeah.
the point I'm going to get to.
Because you would find on our board that there are different people who believe different things too.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, what I hear, as I said earlier, what I hear you asking is that, you know, could we delay moving ahead with some of our activity on this so that CapDev would have the opportunity to do some work for you and come back with some ideas about what they think they could raise, right?
I don't think we want you to delay. I think we want to proceed
Okay,
simultaneously. on both
and
things.
here's the way I think this might work, for me anyway. We know, although there's been quite discussion here at the council about how much we can spend on the library without sacrificing the archives, which is a very important piece to us, right? So we know we're going to have to spend more money on even option three, right? Let alone option one if we were to do it. So why wouldn't we proceed on the basis, which would be very helpful to the village, that we will continue to pursue option three, which is where we were last 2 weeks ago in our consensus here. Yeah, we will pursue that, and we will work on building the best building that it can be, and outfitted in the most responsible way that it can be for the residents of Pinehurst of all ages. Any money that you would raise would be contributed to that function at option three. It would allow us, from whatever you would raise, to do some special things in that building that we otherwise might not be able to do in option three. And it takes away, though, option one or something like it that's a lot more expensive for us and for you, and maybe have some difficulties into the future in the location that it's in, right? So I'm wondering if we can't continue to pursue option three, to make that the best building that it can possibly be. And whatever CapDev can raise is going to come back to that option and assist the village to build it in even a nicer way, depending on how much money you can raise, rather than kind of keep working around about option one and across the road and 2 stories and topography and all of that, which I think will delay this decision and frustrate our consultants to some degree and building contracts and all, because we're just delaying the process. So to me, you've come here to tell us that you want the opportunity to raise some money to make the library the best building that it can be. And I think that from what we've been discussing here for a long time, I mean years, let alone in the last couple of months and tonight and 2 weeks ago, the option here is really, let's proceed with option three. Let's put all the money we can contribute from the village and all the money that you can raise, which will reduce the village's contribution a little bit maybe, or just let us together create the best building we can
You have
do.
to assume the donor money has to be additive to what the
Yeah.
village
We don't want
otherwise,
the
because otherwise why would they give? Right?
Say that in another way, go ahead.
that I don't think it's very persuasive to say to a donor, let's save the Village of Pinehurst money on this
Right.
building by you
It's going to be
contributing.
additive.
Donors would not be happy if it turned out
Better
you guys are
said.
not
You're
going
at-
to
I
do
think
the.
if we
Absolutely
had this
right.
contribution, we might be able to do another floor, or we might be able to do another wing, or, you know.
Well, we might be able to do the expanded version of option 3 now, not delay that. And outfitting that internally, as you've just said, in an additive way. That's very important, and I totally agree with that. To do some things that donors would appreciate and would identify with, that would allow the village and the foundation together to build the best building it could be in that space. So that's my thought.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's already started to occur. We've asked Oakley Collier to put together a different facade for option number 3, just something that maybe mirrors the Given Memorial Library a little bit more, and it's just more.
Well, the final architecture isn't even really known at this point.
Yeah, they just have
That's something that can be worked on for sure.
Out with the current renderings of option number 3 would probably be more difficult for us to raise very much, for sure. Yeah.
Council, how do you
Diane?
feel about any of this?
If we went to go raise as part with CapDev with the current renderings that Oakley Collier provided, it's probably unlikely that we would raise as much as if we showed something that was a little more impressive.
Yeah, okay.
You need good pictures, right?
Well,
You wanna be
I
able to
wasn't
visualize it,
wild
yeah.
about what they gave. You know, all you guys are saying what I want to know what this public wants. I would love the best library possible. But if the public, I'm just trying to get my head around what does the public want. And I think there are members of the public who don't go to this library because it doesn't have what they want. And I think libraries can afford opportunities that are not reflected in the current library. So,
Well, I think we have a lot of evidence about what the public wants, and we can all interpret some of their statements a little bit different from another. But if we would proceed, I think, in the way I'm suggesting, I'm pretty sure we would meet the needs of all the things that are critical and important and nice. Not everything, but would be critical to making that building the most useful, identifiable, and usable building that that could be. So that's my thought on how we should proceed, because we do have Oakley Collier doing some work right now. We expect them to come back, and they've sharpened their pencils on the one hand, but maybe they can with the help from whatever the foundation can do, restore anything to make the building the most effective building it can be. Council, does that appeal to you, Tom? Jeff?
I'm going to hold off on the appeal question here, but I'm glad you asked a question, because it seems like today we've been giving a lot of opinions, and we brought the foundation up here to ask them questions as to what's going on. And what has transpired is, after a few questions, and it went into basically opinions here. I appreciate the presentation. And one of the things that I think is highlighted that impacted me, and I totally agree with, was the generational gift. Because the libraries I used when I was a kid were paid for by my grandparents, I'm sure. And it is a municipal function. And we do have private libraries in our country, but for the most part, it's a municipal type issue. I ask a question to you, if you can answer this or not, but like in other examples, what percentage of the population usually uses a library? Do you not?
Audrey would have that, or, yeah.
Audrey would probably be better.
Okay. Because, but spitballing it, I would imagine the minority typically uses it. And just like what percentage uses the ball fields. And so if you look at it per year, how often you're going to use it versus, per every 2 years or 5 years, whatever the case is. But it's there for the people who want the services or who potentially need the services. And while we live in a fantastic community, and you're right, we've got internet coverage and things like that, but not every kid has that. And, we got a lot of other services that I pray we never have to use. I pray I never have to use the fire department. But we're going to have a fire department. Obviously, it's public safety. It's obviously need, and I understand. I was involved in an organization called Friend to Friend. It provided services for domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. And I pray that the vast majority of our residents, particularly our women, don't have to use that service either. But it's a service that's there. It's a service that makes our community better. And when you look at athletic and ball fields and stuff, which I love, sports, playing sports, I think the data was, at least when I was in high school, was about 1% of high school athletes are going to get a scholarship to play college ball. Choose your sport. Then about 1% of the college athletes are going to end up playing pro ball. Again, choose your sport. The likelihood that you're going to develop skill sets on the ball field that are truly going to impact your career later on, pretty low. But when you go to a library, the likelihood that you're developing skill sets are going to help you for your career, that's a lot higher. And I know COVID hit us, and that put some kids behind. Some kids it didn't put them behind, but some kids it did. I do know in talking with some of the teachers that we have in the area, we do have kids that have literacy issues. Not every kid in our community is an honor student, okay? So to be able to provide that, I think, is important. And so I go back to even the conversations that Patrick had and a lot of the opinions that were there. I don't think it disagreed with the recommendations. Because you want a library, I want a library. I don't want to break the bank, you don't want to break the bank, okay? And the Given Tufts Foundation recommends selecting a site that allows for future expansion, okay? They presented data here that looked at, 14, 16, 20,000 square feet, which option 3 did not have. That had an expansion, if I remember correctly, of about just a little bit over 2,000 feet was the expansion site. And so you may have to move the driveway to allow more expansion room and things like that. Second recommendation, we recommend leaving open the option of building a larger library long enough to finish the feasibility study. John, you just mentioned you want to go with option 3 and state that. I don't see a problem leaving open the option of a larger library, whether that's option 3 or that's option 1. I don't see where it benefits us to have to make a recommendation right now to go with one option versus the other, and to certainly see what the foundation can bring forth. When we made we didn't make a decision, we talked about it last meeting. I personally did not know about the potential of millions of dollars coming in. And maybe it's not going to be millions of dollars. Maybe it's going to be 100,000. Okay, I don't know that. Okay, but if that doesn't affect your decision making, I question that. Okay, because if there's a lot of money coming in and you're not taking that into account, I think we're doing a disservice to our community. And I'm read all the materials you all read. Okay, I recognize that a majority of the people are not going to be using this library. We make it a digital hub. We make it a modern library. We have the capabilities to do it. I think it's going to benefit enough of our residents that we need to continue to pursue that. And I don't personally have a problem with either one of the recommendations that were given right there, and I don't see how it's going to hurt us. So when you say, John, do I support it on just going with option 3? No, I don't think we need to. Well, let's give them a chance. Okay, let's keep working on what we have on this side. It's not going to hurt us. Okay, it's not going to slow us down. So again, those 2 recommendations that are on there, I've heard nothing really to say go against that in all the different conversations we've had, other than maybe just selecting the option 3, because we're all saying, well, let's look at something that has future expansion. Let's see what amount of money they're going to give to us. So thank you.
Jeff Morgan, you just said, I wrote it down, services that make our community better. How does a library make a community better? How do we tell our public that a library, I think it makes it better, but I want somebody who knows libraries to tell me how how is that a service that makes a community better?
Childhood literacy, cultural development. I mean, we could be here for quite some time. The same question as the community center. I think every night between Monday and Thursday, there are 1,000 people on those fields using the community center, using those ball fields. And, just because 40% of the population doesn't use it does not mean those are not tremendous assets to this village.
And I agree with that. For those who say we're all digital, we don't need books, I think that maybe that's an esoteric way to look at it, but to me, libraries do provide a service that benefit the community. I wish I were better at articulating it. Like, does it keep kids off the street? Does it keep them from drugs? Is there any data out there about?
Happy to, find a few studies.
Anything like that shows the benefits of all a library can provide to a community, besides a place where you go and just check out books, would be valuable to me.
Yeah, and I think the needs assessment highlighted a number of things that could be provided there in terms of book clubs for the older population, would be able to expand programming for, kids in the 3 to 10 range, which is currently provided on Saturdays at the current Given Memorial Library. Excuse me, all these things could just be expanded and, actually to adequately serve the needs of the public.
I mean, just speaking anecdotally, based on my own family's experience, by the time this library is finished, my youngest will be in college. Right? But had we had a library with a good young adult section, our kids would have loved to walk into the center, get a book, read it there, meet their friends from school, have study groups there. You want people walking into the middle of the village. This would be a huge attraction, particularly for children. And I think it's a shame that we didn't have that. To some extent, Southern Pines Library was a imperfect substitute for that, but that meant they had to get in the car, somebody had to take them, that sort of thing. But, I mean, on a issue, my day job, I work as the executive director of Partners for Children, which is the principal charity in Moore County that supports early childhood development in Moore County. And so I know a lot about literacy rates. And, in Moore County, I don't have a real specific for Pinehurst, but in Moore County, about 50% of children at the 3rd grade are not reading well enough that you can say this person reads well enough to advance their potential, whether that's, in a trade or in a profession, et cetera. Now, those are about average for what the other Tier 3 counties are doing. We're not off the other Tier 3 counties, Tier 3 being the 20 most developed counties in in North Carolina, of which we are one, but they are significantly below the national averages. So there's progress that needs to get made, and this would be one investment we could make, towards improving that. But it's not just about literacy for children. There's so many other things that can happen at the library if you had a fulsome library.
Again, this is a library for the village of Pinehurst, not for Moore County. That's where I think we've gotten this sort of, I'll call budget creep, mission creep. It's a library for the village of Pinehurst. That's why I focused on the data about the village of Pinehurst. We just heard earlier tonight, we have the #1 elementary school in the entire county of Moore, right down the corner here, Pinehurst Elementary School. And they have their own library there too for the kids. Matter of fact, I thought they had the closest numbers, if I saw your chart correctly, to the statewide average, okay? So we have a success story here on that. Well, I'm not, but
Wouldn't you like to keep it successful? And also, we don't need to argue about how many kids there are, right? There, 19% of the kids and 19% of the population of Southern Pines is 18 and under. 18% of the population in Pinehurst is 18 or under. We're a bigger municipality, so we probably actually have more kids here than they do in Southern Pines. In Southern Pines, the library is chock-a-block full at 14,000 to 15,000 square foot. It's a wonderful asset for that community. Why wouldn't we want something at least as nice? That's not me saying you have to build a 15,000 square foot library this year,
No.
but let's plan for the eventuality that may eventually happen. Let's leave
Let me
our options
let me
open.
quote you. Select a site that allows for future expansion. I agree.
That's what I just said.
Okay, so we've got a site that allows for future expansion. And that's my focus. I'm not for delaying.
But your second bullet, we recommend leaving open the option of building a larger library long enough to finish the feasibility study. So just leaving that on the table doesn't impact us at all. I mean, it allows you to go do your feasibility study. And if you say, sorry, we can't do it, then that necessarily makes us back down. But just because we leave that option there doesn't commit us to anything, if I'm reading that second bullet correctly.
Not sure I get your point, but
Okay,
I think
you
I
said
agree
leave open the option of building a larger library long enough for you to do your feasibility study. So we just leave it there until you do your feasibility study. You may come back and say, we can raise the money for a larger library, and we still go, we're not so sure that's what we want to do.
Lee, I think I
guess,
understand.
I guess if you knew that even if somebody gave you the money, you wouldn't build a larger library, then we shouldn't waste our time in the feasibility study. So I guess there is sort of a decision there when you say, let's do the capital campaign, that you would actually, nobody wants to waste their time. Yeah. There is sort of an idea there that if you got more money from private donors, you would be wanting to build a larger library.
The purpose of this, as I understand it, correct me if I'm stating this incorrectly, the purpose of the feasibility study and the follow-on to raise funds is to be additive, not to reduce the price tag for Pinehurst. Okay? And so we're talking about leaving that option open. Let's, if the foundation comes back and says, lo and behold, we've got $5 million, and I'm just pulling that out of the sky, okay? That will certainly affect my decision-making process on what I'm going to be voting for in a library, because it has significantly reduced what we're getting for the money
Oh,
is
I
significantly
agree with that.
greater otherwise. Okay, it's a public-private type of partnership.
I
So
agree with that approach.
that is why I think the option, which is the key word here, is worthwhile. We're not hurting ourselves by having that option. We're not having to pay for the option. It's being given to us by a foundation saying, hey, give us a chance to make a bigger library because we want a bigger library.
Well, and you just said what I said. We're not hurting ourselves by
Correct.
leaving. Okay.
It doesn't cost anything. So again, the only thing I've disagreed with, because ultimately with what Patrick said, what John said on the discussion here, coincides with what the recommendations were, with the exception that John commented about going with option 3 and kind of locking that in. And I don't think we need to lock that in at this point in time. We can continue to work on the interior type of stuff, and it's not hurting us. So I think it's a very reasonable and common sense approach that we take these recommendations.
I think we have to remember here too that, the size of the library, whatever it becomes, is something that the Village of Pinehurst is going to have to maintain over time.
With our support too, yeah.
Yeah, there will always be the support from the foundation for the spinoff on the investments every year. That's correct. But we do need to consider the fact that we can't build a library of whatever because A, it's not going to fit us, we may not have the land to do it, and it would create a long-term burden on the residents of Pinehurst, in my opinion. Now, I don't know what's different about what I suggested, though. You want to finish a feasibility study. Last week, 2 weeks ago, 5 members of the village council had a strong consensus to go to option 3 and to build it to the best degree we can. I've offered the idea of your contribution to that to be additive, including the expansion of that spot from the get-go rather than waiting. But I do think we need to keep moving along on this. And we can, but again, I'm going to ask council to make a decision here whether we're going to continue on the line that we agreed to 2 weeks ago and pursue option 3 with the understanding that whatever the foundation can do will be well received and will allow us to do an absolutely wonderful job at the option 3 site. And then there's the issue that for me and others that if we even were to consider option 1 or something of that size, better said, because I just can't get into the issue of building on that site across from Village Hall. I just don't see how that's going to provide us with the kind of building that we would want to have and that's functional for our residents. So, council, we need to think about going forward here or changing our plan from 2 weeks ago with the idea that this study that will be done will come back with some number that you can raise, and we will find ways to add that into what we're going to do.
I don't see why we can't do both. Why can't we instruct Oakley Collier, and actually we left them with instructions, to come back to us with the library that they're going to propose for Site 3. And while they're doing that, okay, and however long that takes, you all are doing your feasibility study.
That will, we could.
And that way, we're hopefully reducing what I'll call the lapse between what we decide and when we actually put a shovel in the ground.
No, actually, you'll extend it because you're not working on the common components of both buildings first. That was the way Oakley Collier described that they could shrink that timeline.
Say that again, Jeff?
Yeah.
Just say that one more time.
If you're going to ask them to move forward with design of the total option 3 building, then they're going to be spending their resources and effort on exterior components of option 3 and other elements of option 3 that aren't common with option 1.
Yeah, okay. They can go, they can do that, they were saying. That's what they are doing.
We can do it, but it will move the
What you're
timeline.
saying is if we ended up going to another option,
Yeah.
it would create a problem.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
And my idea was that, of course, Oakley Collier would be working along, continuing the work that they were assigned to do 2 weeks ago. And as you've just explained, that they certainly were going to keep moving on that project. We're not asking them to delay. They're going to keep working, and that's, I think,
They
important.
took part in this conversation that took place a little over a week ago, so right now, we owe them an answer back.
you know,
I
what
thought-
are we supposed to tell them?
Design for which lot, which option?
Are you going to go along with this option? or are you gonna
Recommendations that are given here.
Of which option?
stay on option 3?
If,
Or the hybrid that John just suggested, where
Right.
or Pat just suggested, where we focus on completing a design for option 3 with the possible promise of going to option 1. Now, there's another piece of this that's also, maybe it's a layer of complexity, but it enhances the possibilities for our community. And we talked about this in our meeting last week as well. Option 3 has room for expansion, but as was observed earlier, it doesn't have as much room for expansion as is possible with option 1. This type of a capital campaign feasibility study could be constructed on the basis of if we can get at least, let's say, $1 million, I don't know, that was thrown out in that discussion, then we can expand option 3. If you can get us to $4 million, then we can go to option 1, because the net bill the Village of Pinehurst pays is actually lower than option 3.
Well, wait a minute. I don't know how we could go to option 1. That's a net, I think your phrase was a net savings to the village over option 3?
Right, because as I observed earlier, the difference in price between those options, I think, is about $3.5 million.
part of the issue.
If that's, so if 4 million isn't the right number, well, we got time to work on that, but.
Well, but we
That
want to make
argument
sure
where
that,
we could get to an option 1 that costs
Mm-hmm.
the Village of Pinehurst less than what we would otherwise spend on the base option 3.
well, but if that's true, then what the foundation is contributing to is not additive, it's just reducing what the village would have to pay, which I don't think is
Because you're
acceptable.
going from 3 to 1.
But if it all goes to 3,
No, it's
That's
going
good.
to 1.
if it's additive.
Well, let me say this. One, obviously,
I think we're talking past each other,
we're
John.
getting,
Don't mean to.
we're
So to
trying
make-
to the
So
library.
the promise
Sounds
is,
like a nuclear
if
submarine.
you
Hang
can,
on. Yeah.
if you can raise, let's say it's $4 million, then we'll go from option 3 to option 1.
But we don't like option 1.
I don't think I think behind it all, at least some of us on the council don't think option
You don't-
1,
so
using a space,
If nobody
using a
likes option
location.
1, then let's all just focus on option 3, recognizing that the expansion opportunities are limited there,
Mm-hmm.
and that clarifies what their work is.
Okay, that's one,
Expansion might be limited in terms of square footage compared to another place, but they're not limited with respect to the additive things that could be done
Things.
on from what the foundation could raise. So I'm back to the idea of option 3, we'll make it the best location it can be. The contribution, whatever it is from the foundation, would be additive in making the building nicer than what we could do on our own. And that allows Oakley Collier to continue to develop the site and to come up with their next decision points to us, and we can continue to move on.
pretty close.
So if you were to have a significant donation coming in from the foundation, you wouldn't consider option 1?
I
Or
don't,
if you were to have that, you wouldn't
I'm trying to
consider-
understand the expansion at option 1. I've got the diagram in my head. Where are they expanding?
Yeah, so can I jump in here a little bit?
Well, isn't it just the overall size of the building and the fact it's 2 floors? I mean,
Yeah,
there's
Yeah,
space.
develop space on the base floor.
Yeah, so that's what the.
That's why any expansion cost would be significantly less, goes from $500 a square foot to $150.
It's like finishing out a basement.
Finishing out a basement, yeah.
Yeah, that's
It'll be
exactly right.
done.
And option one, it only has space for a little over 2,000, I think it was 2,250 square feet. Square feet. What was that?
3.
Option three, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're limited in the amount that it could expand there. Their estimate for that expansion was about $1 million. So, you know, if the foundation was able to raise more than $1 million, well, there's no room to build that.
Hold on, let me get back up a little. In option one, it's not about future expansion. We're building expansion now, even though we don't know if we'll need it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well,
The
it's
building
encompassed
design has
within.
unfinished space in it.
Well, boy, that's going to be an interesting sale. So we are telling people, listen, we don't know if we're going to need expansion, okay, but we're going to build the expansion in case we need it.
So option number one right now was built as 12,000 square feet with the option to include roughly 5,000 square feet within the existing envelope.
So it's a total of what
addition,
square feet?
Be
then?
built for 12,000, which
So,
would only be
total,
using.
it would be about 16,000 square feet. It could be.
Yeah, but that's a lot.
it's just the most,
I know there's a construction pricing for the future issue in there, but for me,
that
see
unfinished
that on the
space is
come is
just a
just-
product of the fact that it's on that.
I get
You know,
it.
it's like, think about building a house with a walkout basement, right?
I get it. But if,
Tends to put the basement under the house.
I get it.
You don't have to finish it right now.
But if we don't need the expansion,
Yeah.
we have a bowling alley downstairs? I mean, we just.
Storage space.
What?
Or storage
Storage
space, I
space,
don't know.
whatever. But that's, my idea of a future expansion is, hey, guys, the place is
Footprints.
Well,
blown
and I-
up.
also-
We need to put a wing on over here. That's my idea of future
But
expansion.
how's that any different than, just expanding to built-out space underneath the existing library?
You're making it, what you're doing is you're making a commitment,
Well,
okay, before you know whether or not you need it.
I think too, if you go to option one, I have a hard time seeing how the contribution that the foundation would make, which would have to be sizable because we'd only go that route if it were, how that's going to be additive in the same way it would be for option three, which we know and already talked about, would be additive in the terms of important equipment, other niceties that the foundation would find appealing to its donors. In other words, I think you have a better time selling option three expanded to make it very nice to your donors than saying we're going to do option one, and by the way, X thousand square feet are going to lay idle for a period of time. I don't see how that helps you.
Yeah,
In my
I
opinion.
think we would learn a lot about this in the feasibility study, but just as a sometime donor myself and somebody who's been involved in capital campaigns, I would thought what you would ask them is, would you like to make a contribution that enables us to build a library that's instead of 9,000 square feet, it's 12 or 13,000 square
Yeah.
feet on the day that you open it?
Well-
So that is additive, and some people may find that attractive. I don't know, we need to talk to people.
See, I think part of the issue here is it gets down to square footage, and we're using it in different ways, or considering it in different ways. Square footage at option one appears to be a good thing because it's more square footage, even though it may not be fully fitted out for a period of time. And I don't know
Well,
how
it's more
that helps
square
your raising money.
footage. It's more finished square footage on day one.
I
It's 9,000
wonder though,
versus
Kurt,
12,000,
I
right?
wonder though, Stuart, because option one, I think, would have a more costly, I'll call it base cost, than option three. So we're going to have to put up more money there anyway, which may not be appealing to residents. Whereas if we go to option three and expand it right away, or fit it out before expansion with the incentives that are given to your donors to do that, it seems like that's a better sale to the donors. to
John,
know
I'm
that
not
that's
following
gonna
your
be
logic
done.
on this. I'm just not following it because we're talking right now that The foundation is looking to potentially raise money, and we'll see how much on there, and then to be additive. The difference between option 1 and option 3, and this is coming off of memory, but basically it's 9,000 change square footage for option 3, and it's 12,000 and change for option 1. Day one, the library opened. So it's a 3,000 square foot difference. There's also some built-in storage area on the option 1 that can be expanded easier, which is $125 a square foot for expansion versus the $500 square foot expansion on a place where there's no storage that's on there. My support of option 3 on the last meeting was a lot of it based on the budget, okay? Because I'm not willing to break the bank on what we have. Now what we have here is the potential that funding from a foundation, from private sources, is now going to come in and lower the cost of a, let's say, just say an option 1, if it were there, to build a bigger library, which now makes it potentially attainable. All I'm saying is the recommendations they've given us right here seem very reasonable. I don't see a need for us to commit to option 3 versus option 1. We've had that conversation here lots of different times, that we don't have to make that decision tonight. So let's go with what we have recommended here and see what happens. And if we don't get a lot of donations coming in, or for whatever reason is, we can still go back to the option 3 we talked about. I do understand when they say recommending a site that allows for future expansion. When I look at that, and again, I'm going off of memory here on looking at the plans, but if you look at how they've done it, you have basically a driveway that limits expansion. Is there a possibility of moving that driveway out to open up the expansion more? That's a question for our architects to do that. But it seems very simple because we're talking about a driveway, and that fulfills the recommendation for future expansion. We've had a great relationship with the foundation. Okay, we have moved through this, that we know who they are. They're our fellow citizens, and let's give them the courtesies of what they're recommending right here, and let's work with them. This doesn't hurt us.
I'm just worried about a delay, and I personally don't like, maybe there's an option 1 that could be built somewhere else, but
I don't like it either, John.
across the street, I don't think we want to get into that.
The comment was used before about water going downhill. If you remember, we started with option 1, and then we went to option 1A because we moved it up the hill a little bit, okay? And it was based on the concerns in
That's
there.
right.
And it's one of the reasons it kept growing in price tag.
Oh, I understand.
That is
That's not lost on me.
You know, we've sort of lost our way in what was the dollars we had put forward and told people we were going to spend on the archives and the library. And we need to sort of get back to that first principle of, I'm not saying we got to stick precisely with that amount of money. I realize it's going to be more than the 4.6 plus the $400,000, $5 million. But we've got to at some point say, hey, taxpayers, not only is there a capital commitment to build this, but there is a long-term operating commitment. It costs a lot more to operate a 17,000 square foot library than it does to operate a 9,000 square foot
How
library.
much is that?
What's that?
How much is that?
I have no idea. You want to, but I'll tell you what, it's twice the square footage. It's going to be more.
I will agree. It's twice the square footage.
Okay.
Okay, so you got that one.
Okay. I don't need to be.
The point of it is that we don't know the difference on the operating expenses that are on there, but I would assume that they are more.
Okay.
That's on there. I also recognize that we have a foundation that's supporting us and helping us in those operating expenses. So again, this is not like we have a foundation to support the fire department to build a new fire station. We don't have a foundation to support the police department to build a new police station. Okay, this is a private group that's assisting us with it. Let's give them the courtesy of see what they can do. That's all.
I said we could do both. We can begin on
But maybe
option-
we're saying the same thing then.
Well, we can begin going forward on option 3, and they can do their feasibility study and see what it comes back with and says.
Why don't you just not even say option 3 and just give them what they're recommended right there?
Say that again?
Why not just not say option 3 and say, okay, if it's a potential for option 1 and they've raised a lot of money because they can use that to get this additive effect to it and it makes it the same cost as option 3?
Because I
If
know,
you-
because we've all looked at that site at option 1.
I
And
understand.
it sure looks real challenging. It's got much more potential for something to turn what we want to be the object of the affection of our community, a library that people will go and use
I got it.
As opposed to something that they're going to be shaking their heads at.
Well, I got it, but I'm going to trust the architect's opinion as to whether they're going to be able to build on that site or not build on that site.
They can
Jeff
build
just talked about it. It's like having a basement that walks out because it's the topography of what's in there. So if you're now magically a building expert and can tell me that that's a bad thing to do, I'm all ears.
Again, Jeff, my concern about option one in the place where it's been planned is the site and the problems I perceive to be long-term and short-term to build there. So
Then let's have Oakley Collier answer those questions.
Well, that's the reason I'm just trying to keep the ball moving here by focusing on option three and making any of the contributions that the foundation would have go to be additive to that site. It just seems to me a lot cleaner. It gives us a way forward very
And you're
soon.
basing that on
And
because
anything that they come back with, whether it's X or 2X or 3X, is going to help make that option three the best site that it can be.
And John, what I'm understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is that you recommend that because you just have a bad feeling about putting it in that site.
No, that's not the only thing. I think that, and that's the reason I made this proposal, that if we go now with option three and understand that anything the foundation raises is going to be additive to that building, right? It's going to help them raise money because they can tangibly talk about a place and a building that's going to be developing over the next few months, and that helps you raise money. Rather than have this idea that out there you can raise some money and maybe we'll switch from the option that's been already of a consensus vote of the council to go to option three, and you have this other thing going on over here with some other option number one.
So what
I think
would
it's
get you to
confusing.
choose option one? What would get you to choose option one versus option three?
Pretty much nothing at this point.
Same here.
There's nothing that have you go there.
I just know.
Like the
If it was a
location, don't like
better
the-
site, your argument would be more appealing.
What?
If it was a better site, it would be more appealing.
Okay.
But
I got to tell you, when I'm listening to architects who say they can do this, I put more value than what your opinion is there about liking
Look,
it.
you know, I've said it before.
fair.
Never ask a barber if you need a haircut. You can find an
I got
architect. You can find an architect who can tell you anything you want. But when they came here and showed us what they were going to do, and they put the price tag on it,
got it.
okay, that was the eye opener.
And the price tag changes whenever you have a foundation that's supporting you,
But their
okay?
price-
So that's
I
my
don't know if I have
question is what's
confidence
the
in their
difference?
price tag, to be honest
Okay.
with you.
All right, I'm going to make a motion. The motion is that the village council continues to endorse the development of option number three for the location of the given library, with the understanding that any and all funds raised by the foundation, the given Tufts Foundation, will go to the enhancement of option three as that building is developed. Is there a second for the motion?
We'll go to the enhancement of option three.
We'll go to option three and enhance and be devoted to additive or enhancing features of that building. Okay?
And if we pass
So you
this
understand my
motion,
concept? We can-
if we pass this motion, then the next steps would be what? Go to Oakley
The
Collier?
next steps, in
and
my
say-
opinion, would be we continue to have Oakley Collier do the work that it's been assigned and continue to answer their questions and direction, while the foundation goes to its CapDev consultant and tries to figure out exactly what you think that can be raised, and that all of those funds, as they are raised, will go to option three.
And you said, one more question. You said you needed what from the architect to help you with your fundraising?
It would be more helpful if you had some, not just
Sure.
floor plans, but some renderings
Sure.
of what the external.
Would help me too. Before can we discuss, or are we going to move on the motion?
Need a second,
Okay. Well, I'll second it, but I want to discuss it.
okay?
Okay.
It's under discussion.
I want to be sure that we're not locking in Givens Tough to having to use money solely for brick and mortar. I want to be sure that that the funding that they will contribute, whatever it may be, it can be used for things aside from brick and mortar. It can be used for programmatic activities, for special equipment, for whatever it is, because I just don't want to see, unless you think it's more helpful to say it's brick and mortar.
I don't think programmatic, but I think it might be, for instance.
That's my intention.
It might be, this is the money that takes us into a leather chair type of library instead of a vinyl chair type of
I get that,
library.
I get that
Not
analogy.
that you do vinyl, but
I
you know.
get that analogy. I'm fine then.
I think we'd be more concerned if we could not use it for brick and mortar. If you expect us to use it for a computer lab or features within the library, yeah, we'd be more concerned with that. And that's, yeah.
I would say you could do anything you want with a particular donor that might be attractive to him or her
See what inspires
and,
people.
and go from there.
What the appetite
Is there further discussion on the motion?
And you're going to leave
Now-
it, you said to enhance the,
My wording would be better, but I think as Pat's question just answered by Stuart gets to the point, the idea is that money that they raise goes to enhance enhance the building as a library and meet special needs, special, give me an idea.
so at what point do we determine what the village's contribution to this is?
I think all those sort of things have to be worked out, but
See them come back with a bit of a design.
Right.
And we need to analyze that and so forth. But now they would have a site of which to work from. And they already have some preliminary ideas, but we're ways off from them showing us something that looks like Pinehurst. The artist conception I saw didn't particularly look like Pinehurst to me. It looked more, I don't.
I like Pinehurst.
It didn't look like Pinehurst, I'll say that. But, and I'm sure they're very capable to construct or design something that looks like it fits into our, when I say Pinehurst, I mean this sort of campus area too. If you look at all our buildings, there is a little bit of a style here.
That will be the intent. And I think that was, it was a first cut, but that has always been their intent as well.
Okay, well, that's good. I feel good about it.
is there any further discussion on the motion? And I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion, say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries 4-1. That's good direction. We look forward to continued working with you, Stuart, Evan, and all the other board members.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Move on to the rest of our work session.
Closed session.
I know. And the only other point I wanted to make in the work session is going back a few meetings ago on the broadband issue.
On the what band?
The broadband.
Yes.
At some point, an update on that would be helpful, next meeting, whatever. Is there any other business to be raised in the work session?
Just a comment, I've been notified by Reagan Parsons that the town of Southern Pines adopted the MOU unanimously as well.
So Aberdeen approved it yesterday, Southern Pines tonight, Pinehurst tonight.
That's right.
And we'll take that to the meeting on October 19. And do we report that back to Scott Walston, and then he will inform the other towns? Might be good if we told him that.
We will.
And
yeah.
he can do that. All right. Okay. Is there any other business for the work session? Is there a motion then to move into closed session?
I motion that we move into closed session.
We have to read
Oh,
this thing.
close the, go ahead, you have it.
I move to
mo-
recess the work session and enter a closed session.
That's a motion by Jeff Morgan.
But
Is
you
there a
have to
second?
say pursuant to what? Pursuant, can you do it, do the
Go ahead.
pursuant, you have to do it, okay. I move that we go into, we go into a closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Section 143-318-11A6, to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of appointment, or condition of initial employment of an individual public officer or employee or prospective public officer or employee. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second for that motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. The motion carries. We'll go into closed session momentarily as we clear the
We
room.
take a 5-minute break right now?
5-minute break before.
Thank you.